And then one day, 18 Hurricanes turned up. So we stepped out of our Spitfire and into a Hurricane. And there was no problem. Both aircraft were childishly easy to fly. And that was on about mid-June. And then by the 4th of July, the man with the scrambled eggs turned up on his hat and he said, "You are now ready to take the enemy." And I was 19 years old. And in the afternoon on the 4th of July, we became operational. And in the afternoon of the same day, I intercepted my first German aircraft. I won't tell you with what result. So during the next 4 months, I flew against the Luftwaffe 141 times. I lost 5 Hurricanes, one way and another, and I finished up at the end a little, shall I say, frayed at the edges, but otherwise more or less in one piece. My squadron, 249 Squadron, moved down from Yorkshire to Boscombe Down, which is just on the periphery of the, well, it's next door to Salisbury. And on the 15th, I spent the night as the operations officer sitting in a hut answering the telephone. I was Pilot Officer Neil. And the following morning, I got up very early and I went to my aircraft. And I put my parachute on the tail and I did all the things that was necessary because I thought I was going to fly that day. And I have to tell you here that when you're a fighter pilot, you grow to love your aircraft. You grow very much akin to it. Heavy boiler pilots with lots of engines, they don't worry so much. With a fighter pilot, your aircraft is your friend. It's rather like the family dog, you get used to it. And I was very fond of my aircraft, but I remember the number now, P3616. And I was walking back from my aircraft, and my flight commander accosted me. Well, accosted is not quite the right word. He said, "Ginger," and I was called Ginger in those days because my hair was a sort of pale marmalade color. And he said, "You're not flying today. You were up all night. I don't want you to fly." Well, I argued with him quite some time. I said, "I don't want anyone else to fly my aircraft." He said, "No, you're not going to fly. I'm going to give it to Martin King, another pilot officer." But then I was very cross with him, but I went to the mess, and that was that. And about lunchtime, the squadron took off, and I rushed back to dispersal. Dispersal was about 1.5 miles away. And we heard down there that there had been an engagement. They were over Southampton or thereabouts, and that we had lost some aircraft. And indeed we had. We'd lost 3. The flight commander, Nicholson, my aircraft with Martin King, and another squadron leader, King, who was then supernumerary squadron commander who was flying with them. And when your aircraft is shot down, you don't hear about it. Well, you know what the result is, but you don't hear the details of it until a little later. And it's the detail I want to tell you about, because it's rather interesting. Around north part of, thank you very much, it's very kind of you. It's not gin, is it? About the north part of Southampton, Nicholson was attacked by some Messerschmitt 110 fighters. The Messerschmitt are a 2-seater fighter, very formidable armament. And the first thing he knew, there was a shower of shells in his cockpit, and he was wounded in the left leg and left heel. He was wounded also in the right foot, and his aircraft was set on fire. The Hurricane was very prone to being set on fire. So he struggled to get out, because if you're in a Hurricane and it's set on fire, you've got about 3 seconds to get out before you're barbecued. So he was dead keen to get out, and he was struggling to do that. And suddenly the chap who had shot him overshot. It very happened often when you're attacked. Usually the aircraft is shooting at you from the back, overshoots, and it comes up in front of you. And this aeroplane reared up in front of him, and Nick then shot it down. Now, this is what he said, because he had a vivid imagination, Nick. And anyway, very much singed, he got out of the aeroplane and began to come down by parachute. And when he explained it to me afterwards, he was very touching. He said, you know, I was coming down, we came down about 18,000 feet. He said, I was coming down, and I looked at the skin on my arms, and they were all hanging on like drapes. And he said there was a very powerful smell of roast pork. And he was getting close to the ground, and there were some army people underneath. Now, whether they were LDV, local defense volunteers, sort of Dad's army bit, or regular folk, I don't know. But they thought they were being invaded, and people were very suspicious that they saw parachutes in the air. And so they shot at him. Fortunately, Nick had his bum turned towards them, so he received most of the bullets in his backside. But he fell to the ground, and of course, he was very seriously injured. He was carted off to hospital. And we didn't hear much about it until 2 or 3 days later when his nurse sent us a letter. But what happened to my aircraft, you may well ask. Martin King in my aircraft was also shot down. And he came down by parachute. And as he was approaching the ground, the army shot at him too. But they did a better job with him. They killed him. And his parachute in shreds, he fell to the ground and died in a girl's arms in the garden of somewhere. The other, King, Squadron Leader King, he scrambled back to the airfield. He went off and wrote a book about it and told me how to fight the Germans. He then posted the next day to 151 Squadron, and a week later he was shot down and killed. So that first group of 3 aircraft was a tragic group, and of course that is how I lost my first aircraft.